Hi, everyone. Psychological stress is a lived experience for many college students. As impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic wane, stress related to career opportunities actually continue to rise. A recent article published in Psychology Research and Behavioral Management suggests that resilience can moderate the effects of stress on mental health. But how can we as educators create conditions that promote resilience? How can we equip students with the confidence of how they can move forward into a job market that seems increasingly uncertain? We will discuss one approach to that today on this episode of Teaching Matters.
Welcome to Teaching Matters, a podcast exploring all things teaching and learning. Teaching Matters is produced by NPR affiliate WOUV Public Media in Athens, Ohio. And here is your host, Dr. Scott Titsworth, Dean of the Scripps College of Communication at Ohio University.
Thank you, Trinity. Joining me today is Stephanie Hickman Boyse. She's the CEO and co-founder of Jebbee, a social networking platform that helps students discover career options and connect with professionals, find majors, and learn about companies, among other things. The AI-driven platform has received App of the Week distinction for multiple sources. Stephanie, thank you so much for your time and being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start by having listeners learn a little bit more about you. I read in an article that was published by your alma mater, Michigan State, that you sort of went through what a lot of college students go through, where you were trying to find who you were and what your major was going to be, what your career might be. Can you kind of talk about your experiences?
Absolutely. Well, I think we all have our own story, right? And so mine is probably not too dissimilar from many others. As a student coming out of high school, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. That wasn't really much of a topic that we had at the high school level. So I entered college, like many students, with the assumption that I would figure it out as I went along. So I, as a student, really thought I wanted to start off in psychology. Thought I wanted to be in psychology. Then I switched majors to sociology, and finally found my way to advertising, PR, corporate communications. To become a manufacturing CEO later on in life. So as we see that we have these interests that jump around, for me it was a great opportunity in that Michigan State as a university happened to allow us to change majors, find our way without huge penalization. I did a number of internships along the way that really helped me sort of define what I didn't want to do and what I did want to do. And that was really a lot of the reasoning for changing majors. But the other thing I do attribute it to is I had the benefit of having parents that were very involved in that process and a father who had access to an industrial psychologist to help me along the way. And I say that because that's not usually how things go. And it was through that industrial psychologist that really took my desire for business and psychology and matched it to my creative side of my world. That said, you really like the creative side, and being able to match it with psychology and with your business interests and entrepreneurial interests, that's maybe where advertising and marketing and PR and corporate communications may come into play. And I'm not sure that I really would have found it without that help of defining my sort of personality profile, going through some assessments along the way to really help me match it with a major that I didn't really understand could tie those two things together. And I was fortunate enough that I was at a university that gave me the flexibility to be able to find my path along that way. So I tell that story because it is important to me that a lot of students can't afford to do that and don't have the parents that have those resources. And it's a big piece of why we've developed Jebbee to become a free public resource to every student, to give them the same ability as I had. And now having the benefit of AI to be able to probably be even more accurate at helping every student to be able to drive that assessment and help them find their passion.
As you think back about, when you were able to get that information and develop a new idea for what your major would be, how did that impact you from sort of a psychological standpoint? I mean, and I say that in the context, I work with college students every day, and the question that really is at the forefront of their mind is, what's it going to look like when I graduate and get a job? Less about, we're in the field of communication in my college, and so the students are pretty confident that they want to be here, less about switching majors. But even within the field, you will have students that are like, should I be majoring in this part of communication or this part of communication? And so how did you feel was it an aha moment? Did it reduce stress that you were feeling? What was it like when you sort of discovered that you had a new path open to you?
It was a relief, right? So I was sort of bouncing along trying to find my way based on a lot of false assumptions. And so it was a giant stress release for me to be able to find that combination of a major with the assumption that later on there would be a job that would be fulfilling to me and purposeful, and which is really what I think every student ultimately is looking for. And so to leave high school with no path is stressful. And I think that having any sort of sense of, okay, I might want to go into this area. And then our next piece is, all right, now I'm in this major, but what really are the jobs that are available in the real world that are out there that associate with this major? And I think that's the next level of stress, right? We as students are in our path, we're taking classes, we're finding out that this is interesting and maybe I don't like that. And so I want to maybe go into this end of a field and not that end of the field, but what are they? And I think as universities, it's hard for us. A lot of universities do a great job at bringing professionals like me. I speak at colleges a lot to try to tell my story, to try to help a couple of kids in a big auditorium, we hope, that maybe want to sort of follow this path and not that path. But it's not very well defined today. And so I think what we're really trying to build is a tool that universities, that high schools, that parents, that students can use to help them fill in the gaps along the way and really help relieve that stress of, I'm a junior in college, I'm a senior in college. I hear this story a lot. I'm a senior in college and I have this major and I still don't know what jobs I should be looking for that pertain to the major that I have. We especially find that in creative fields, history, art, but even communications, arts, and sciences, which is the program I came out of, has some pretty well-defined, careers that relate to the majors that we have, but they are all different. And, a job title in one company can be very different than a job title in another company. And so being able to connect with professionals that are in those real world jobs, I think is really critical to be able to give our students some confidence that they have a pathway out of college or that they have a pathway out of high school and that they understand what that is. Because, I think we all know as professionals, because we've been through it, those first couple of years out of college are hard. Those first couple of years out of high school are hard because we're going into a world that is undefined for us. And we have a lot of ideas in our head as to what a career should look like and feel like and what a company should be like to work for. And it's oftentimes very different than our ideology. And so having that mentorship and having that the resource and the information at hand and a better defined path going into those situations, I think really helps us relieve stress. It gives us a more realistic idea of what we are dealing with. And when we have information, oftentimes we can deal with things much better, more successfully.
Yeah, I mean, just to underscore, the point that you were making, if I look back, 25 to 30 years of when I was an undergraduate, the majors are very different now. And, whereas I would have gotten a communication major, inside my communication college now, there's an array of 15 different majors that students could have. And you're absolutely right that then how that maps into certain types of positions within companies, or if people want to go into freelance work, on their own, all of that, there's a language associated with that that's not 100% apparent until you learn the code. And so the point you make is really good. It's not as simple as just saying, well, go get your major, because you do have to make some decisions about that. And making informed decisions is really what I think everyone in higher ed and certainly your platform is trying to help students with. When I was looking through a little bit about your background, you went from working from one type of company to then starting an ed tech company. What led you to sort of switch fields like that and go into developing Jebbee that is really focused on students rather than something that's more like manufacturing?
Yeah, so I spent my last 30 years, as I mentioned, I have an advertising degree, and then I spent my last 30 years running a high-tech manufacturing firm. So very different things that I fell into, and loved what I did in manufacturing. A big part of that is why I created Jebbee as an employer. So I did a lot of jobs along the way, as we do before we become CEO, right? So I was in sales and operations. I lived overseas in Mexico for 2 years, starting up a factory there. I did international business development, and then I fell into HR. And that was not a job that I ever had on my list of being interested in doing. But at our company at Boyse, we feel that it's really important for our key executives to have people experience and to understand what that is, because it's a core value of ours. So I did a 2-year stint as vice president of HR and spent an enormous amount of time from the employer perspective in workforce development. So thinking about workforce development from, kids coming out of high school and learning the trades, because we are a manufacturing company. From those working with higher ed, I sat on 2 boards of higher ed institutions during that period of time, through my manufacturing career, and really understood much better the disconnect from K-12 to higher ed or trades into the workforce. And we spent a tremendous amount of money retraining students that were coming to work for us to try to give them the specific skills that they needed to be successful in our company. So that was a big part of the background and level of my interest of wanting to solve that problem. And sitting on 2 boards of higher ed, again, trying to find a way to better connect our faculty to real life, to those professions that were out there, as we often saw academic skills, but not being tied real time enough to what was actually happening pretty quickly out in industry. And so that was another sort of gap that in developing Jebbee now that I had been frustrated with for many years as an employer. So when I retired from manufacturing, I spent a couple of years, I had the benefit that it was COVID, and I forced myself to sort of sit and think, what is my next career going to be that has purpose? And it was sort of this balance of my philanthropic mindset together with my entrepreneurial mindset. And I had the benefit of having a very dear friend of mine who was struggling with this idea of her children, one graduating from University of Michigan and going into the workforce, and she still had no idea what she wanted to do as a senior in college, and her son, who was a senior in high school, going into college, not knowing where he wanted to go or what he wanted to major in. So those 2 things combined really was the initial thought process of her idea behind Jebbee that I then globbed onto as an employer and said, hey, even more so, we have these problems that we need to solve as well. And it was those combination of things that really created the path towards Jebbee. So that's how it all got started. It was really sitting around the kitchen table with our kids and trying to solve these problems, her from the position of a mother and me from the position of an employer who is now the mother of a freshman in college. So we've been watching my daughter go through this path from the time that she was in 8th grade to now being a freshman in college during the time that we've been developing what is now Jebbee.
Jebbee, as I've come to understand it, is a very robust platform, but it also has a look and feel that I think is familiar to students because it looks like social media to some degree, but it's not that. Can you kind of, for listeners and viewers that aren't familiar with the platform, can you describe sort of what your goals were in creating the UX UI design for that so that students would, be drawn into it in a way that's compelling for them?
Yeah, and we included students in the development of Jebbee from the get-go, as I mentioned, anywhere from 8th grade up to a 22-year-old as we were developing it to assure that we were developing a platform that students wanted to use. So the way I like to describe Jebbee is it feels a little bit like TikTok meets LinkedIn for students. And those were the 2 factors that we were really trying to combine, was the functionality of LinkedIn connectedness, building your profile so someday you could hit a button and it would become your resume, or send to Common App. and a way for students to be able to have a profile that professionals like me could connect back to and say, hey, we hire a lot of engineers. We've got a lot of engineering internships. And how can I go out and reach out to students rather than students having to reach out into this black box world that isn't really a skill set that they have yet? So the look and feel of Jebbee is playful. It's very social media-like. We have a lot of user-generated content. That is the purpose behind the platform. Our professionals like you and me, Scott, saying, hey, here's who I am and here's what I do and here's what I've learned along the way, and sharing mentoring information, sharing information and content about day in the life of our jobs and the reality behind them, so that we hope that it's a playful platform for students to learn, because we realize that if it isn't a little bit playful, if it isn't a little bit entertaining, students don't really know what they don't know yet, right? So it was very important for us to find a platform, create a platform that students were entertained with, and that they were interested in learning from. So the ability to combine information and mentoring on a platform that felt very much like social media, that was a little bit entertaining, that was easy for students to swipe through. This is content I do want to see. This is content I don't want to see. And then utilizing AI in a way that was connecting content for students. The one thing that we realized with our own kids and with a lot of other students as we were building Jebbee is that there's a ton of information out there on social media today. But if they don't know what they're looking for, they don't know how to find it. So if they don't know what they want to do yet, how are they able to utilize the benefit of social media to find it? And so Jebbee is a platform that's combining this playful process of, let's do a career assessment that's AI driven, that's fun, that feels like a dating app, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the other piece of this, right? We have a profile, we have an assessment that feels very, dare I say, horoscope-ish, right? I'm reading about myself in a way that lets me deep dive into my personality, and that is suggesting careers for me in very much of a feel of a dating app, where I'm swiping left on something I'm not interested in, and I'm swiping right on something I am interested in. And ultimately, it's suggesting careers that are related to the ones that I want. It's not showing me careers related to the ones that I don't want. AI is taking over, and it's learning me over time. And that's all feeding my profile then with ultimately a list of, here are the careers that you said were your favorites. And I can deep dive on those careers. I can see content from other professionals who have posted content on Jebbee about those careers. And I can start to combine all of these different elements of information and social media together, hopefully in a fun, playful way that starts to feed students, okay, based on what you've told us, here are things that you may want to learn about. And we're coming to them with information rather than forcing them to go out and search for something they don't know where to look for.
Yeah, I was looking through, the platform, and the personality assessment is actually really robust. And of course, when you're in certain positions, you end up taking personality assessments over and over again for different reasons. And this is very reminiscent of one that I recently did. Can you talk about if I'm a student and I join Jebbee for the first time, do I sort of get led through that personality assessment so that the platform understands who I am? And, how does that process work?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing we want you to do is start to build your profile so we know who you are and we can connect you. And it is your profile that then holds the information of everything else that you do. So that next piece is career match. And at the high school level, we have a whole curriculum that is really walking students through this, and that we allow that to be a little more freeform in college and for young professionals beyond. But the personality assessment becomes the next piece that we do, because it informs us of who you are. And based on who you are, we can start to suggest to you careers that are aligned with your personality. You can retake the personality assessment as many times as you want. So if you feel like, no, that hasn't quite captured me, there might be elements that I can tweak in that really then define, that's who I am. And based on who I am, I should start to see careers that are being suggested to me, as I mentioned, that I can train it train the system and train AI to learn more about me, to get more and more accurate. But we're always then suggesting related careers as well, because we want you to have a broad enough understanding of what's out there so that you can start to then define that funnel a little bit more specifically. And we really find that, historically, career assessments kind of give us a handful of careers. There are 10,000 different career categories that exist out there. So there's a lot of different jobs, and new ones are being created every day. So Jebbee is a real-time platform, and we utilize AI to suggest something that, AI wouldn't have been there 4 years ago, right? We need to make sure that we're up to date, and we're suggesting sort of fun, playful careers and different aspects of a career as well. So that personality profile is a really critical element, and then it walks you through the career the personality profile walks you through the career process. And then based on the career process, it starts to feed to your For You feed and the social media elements of it, the job cards where you can do a deep dive and get further information to understand data, questions, frequently asked questions about those jobs, and then also to be able to connect with any professionals that are on Jebbee that have content related to that job, where you can then see their content, you can do Q&A, as opposed to just leaving comments. We allow the ability for professionals and students to kind of go back and forth with questions and answers on Jebbee.
When people are listening to this podcast and they're starting to understand what Jebbee is, they might have the question in their mind, why don't students just go to LinkedIn to start with, given that they'll end up there? So how do you differentiate what Jebbee provides from what LinkedIn provides, and why is it an important, developmental step for students to flow through your platform first?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm on LinkedIn. I've tried to get off LinkedIn for years, and I don't even know how to get off it. As an employer, I will tell you, LinkedIn has a lot of valuable assets for employers, but it was built for professionals and employers. It was not built for students. It's not intuitive for students to use. There are whole classes teaching students how to use LinkedIn. It's not the most intuitive platform for a student. And I will tell you that as an employer, matter of fact, I'm mentoring a student right now in the traditional one-on-one mentoring sort of a way, and she and I are going to start using Jebbee for this reason. It was very confusing for her to figure out why am I on LinkedIn? Well, who am I looking for, and why am I connecting with these people? So many students over the years, I just have a barrage, to be honest with you. As a CEO, you can imagine the number of people that are randomly reaching out for solicitation purposes, for students are reaching out, but there are so many students that are reaching out that after a while you get to the point of just not responding. And I think that's what we hear from students, that they are blindly reaching out and trying to connect to as many people as they possibly can for really no great result. And so at Jebbee, what we're really trying to do is look at this as a platform from the perspective of a student, specifically for a student. And building a Jebbee profile starts off when you're a freshman in high school, really as a means to start building your resume over the next 4 years. That's the first thing that you want to do. And we want to make it very easy for you at the end of your 4 years to print resume, send to Common App, whatever it is that you're wishing to do. So that doesn't have to become an issue for you your senior year, that you now have to go back and you have to do your Common App separately, then you have to do your resume separately, you have to reach out to all these people separately, that you've got one profile that is feeding all sorts of different aspects. From that profile, the thing that we're doing differently on Jebbee than we are than LinkedIn is a school or a company that is connected to your school system for deliberate reasons, right? I have a high school, for example, I'll use my old high school, Adrian High School, who is a Jebbee user. Adrian High School students who are on the Jebbee platform will now be able to connect to their local companies in the Lenawee County area who can then say, hey, we are a Jebbee platform company and we're a partner to your school. And as a partner to your school, we're doing more than just allowing our company to be searchable by your students. We are deliberately being able to connect with you as a school to say, hey, do you have kids that are interested in, I'm going to use engineering again, engineering internships, or just learning more about what engineering is all about?
So you've described the fact, you were just describing the fact that schools can be affiliated with Jebbee, that companies in a community could be affiliated with Jebbee, as obviously could the students. What does the process look like? So if I'm a student or a parent listening to the podcast, and this is something that piques my attention, how do I go about getting on it or getting my student on that? And then the other part of that question is, if I'm a school, and this sounds like something that could be a good resource for the staff to roll out to students, what does that process look like?
Anybody can jump on Jebbee at any time. So you can download Jebbee as a parent, you can download Jebbee as a student, and be on Jebbee as an individual. You can be on Jebbee as a professional, as an individual. In addition to that, high schools and colleges can also have a Jebbee account. So the Jebbee account, from a high school standpoint, we do a little bit more work there in that we're partnering with high schools with a high school curriculum. We have specific benefits to high schools to have all of their students then be a part of the Jebbee platform. And at that point in time, we're generally working directly with the high school administration to create a high school Jebbee account for them. And we give them an entire 4-year curriculum at different levels. There's 3 levels per year. And they can choose how to walk through that curriculum. So we try to make it very easy for high schools to participate. In addition to that, a company can participate on Jebbee in the same way, if you want to think about it like a Facebook page. So every company naturally has a sort of standard Jebbee page by being publicly on the web, but what they can do in terms of being a Jebbee partner is by claiming their page. So they can go on Jebbee, download Jebbee, they can search for their company name under companies, and they can claim their page, and then they can edit their page, add content, add website links, those sorts of things, so that their company has a more robust profile on Jebbee as students are starting to connect. And what we know that high schools and employers as well as colleges can do the same thing. There's always been a goal for these entities to be more connected to each other. And so that's really what we're trying to do through the Jebbee platform, is as a high school is connected, we then go to the companies through the Chamber of Commerce or independently to any company can jump on at any time. They can just download the app and they can go through this process themselves. Or we can do that specifically through the community, which is usually where people learn about Jebbee for the first time, is through their Chamber of Commerce or through their high school administrators. So through that's the process today. At the college level, it's a little bit more similar to the high school in that we're generally partnering with colleges. Michigan State University, for example, is a partner college to us where we have functionality for their students who have a private feed just for Michigan State University, for example, and classrooms that can be set up. Anybody at any time, a matter of fact, can download Jebbee and set up their own group as well. So we have many professors, for example, who have set up their own classroom group on Jebbee. So, Professor Boyse, for example, I might have a Professor Boyse at Michigan State University group that I set up for my classroom. And then it gives me a private feed for me and for my students where I can add content that's pertinent to the class that I'm teaching, inspirational content that might be out there. It may be my students specifically connecting with professionals through my classroom to interview a professional, in which case we do that on Jebbee. It's called Virtual Career Day, where we actually do that in video format so that we can capture the video and we can have a private feed where all students can see every student's interview, and we can build upon that and bank upon those videos for career content into the future. So there's a number of different ways for people to connect, but anybody can download Jebbee today and start connecting and being on the platform. It does not have have to be a formal process. If you are a school or a specific company and wish to contact Jebbee, we can also walk you through the process and help you set up your own pages and set up classrooms and those sorts of things.
Out of curiosity, and this is probably a bit in the weeds, but if I set up a classroom as a professor, like one of the issues that we have, like with LMSs across K-12 and also higher education, is that, you know, when the course ends according to the academic calendar, it goes away, right? And and so in Jebbee, if I'm the teacher of information graphics and I set up a class for my students, do they stay with that, and does that class continue to exist even after the academic calendar says they're technically no longer my students? Because I actually see value in that if that's a possibility.
It is. So if you set up a group, Scott, from for any reason, so in this case, you set up a group and it's filled with members of your class, your existing class today, and you say, okay, class, I want everybody to download Jebbee, and I want you to go to groups, and I want you to join my group, and it's called Professor Scott's group. And so they join as members of that group. Once they're a member of that group, they're always a member of that group unless you kick them out as a member or they then take themselves off as a member. So it lives on after your classroom. And you've jumped on to the entire concept. It's for information, it's for inspiration, it's for classrooms to live on after the class is done. We're also using this in athletic circumstances for student athletes, for example, where we have curriculum that's being taught to student athletes in person, and to companies where we have leadership courses, for example, that's being taught in person. But then the instructor leaves and we forget a lot of what we've learned, right? We need to sometimes be reminded. Yeah. And so in this case, if I'm still a member of that group, I have that content that lives on. And I don't have to recreate the content every year, right? I can build upon my content every year to make my group be more and more robust.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, you started by talking about your personal background, and then through the story of the origin of Jebbee, you talked about, you know, some friends of your family as well as your own children. What are some success stories that you've seen with people that have used the platform? You know, probably anecdotally, but you know, what have you seen happen with students when they get in there and start becoming connected and learning about themselves and learning about opportunities?
Yeah, so it's, I will tell you, it's really fun to watch kids do the personality assessment because they start to have fun with each other. Like, oh yeah, that's totally you. Does that sound like me? So that's been really fun to see the sort of playfulness come through and for them to learn a little something about themselves and to be able to talk to each other about it. We had a student specifically that comes to mind at Michigan State University. He's a student athlete. He's a cheerleader at Michigan State University, and he's been to 3 colleges, and he's been through 3 majors. And so he's this very interesting, incredibly bright kid who's been trying to find his way for years. He's now a junior at Michigan State and finally feels like he's found his place. He's found the right major. But he tells a story, he actually has a video that he did on Jebbee, where he tells the story of using Jebbee's career match to help him realize that he did not want to be in the major in which he was. He was in a psychology major and realized that he really wanted to go into marketing. He had really found that he liked the idea of marketing and selling products and being, more involved in sort of, teamwork and working with people on a more direct level, where he thought before that because he loves people and he loves to work with people, that he had this sense of wanting to help people. And his Jebbee process of going through the personality assessment and then into career match started to funnel this down, that he was starting to like all of these jobs that were much more related to marketing careers than to psychology careers, and he switched his major. And so he has this content, he has a video on Jebbee where he talks all about that being a real breakthrough for him his junior year in college, and thank goodness, because he may have left college going down the wrong path.
Yeah. Thank you for telling his story, and also thank you for telling us the story of Jebbee. And if listeners and viewers are interested, we'll have a link to the platform's website on the text accompanying the podcast. But thank you for providing resources for students. I think that, the world is more complicated than it was certainly when I was growing up, and all the decisions that students have to make. I always tell students that there's not one decision that will permanently scar your ability to move forward, but understanding how to make informed decisions over and over again is so vitally important, and I think that you're providing a real service for students to be able to have some information in doing that, so thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. My guest today has been Stephanie Hickman Boyse. She's the CEO and co-founder of Jebbee. Again, as I said, the link to the platform will be in the text accompanying the podcast if you want to learn more about it. And as Stephanie pointed out, you can join it, and you can not only learn about it, but you can become an active participant on the platform, whether you're a student, parent, employer, or a teacher. So I certainly encourage you to do that. Thank you for listening and watching Teaching Matters. Remember, the podcast is available on all audio-only podcast platforms as well as YouTube if you would like to watch it. If you have information, questions, or ideas, don't hesitate to reach out to the podcast by emailing teachingmatterspodcast@ohio.edu. teachingmatterspodcast@ohio.edu. It's all lowercase and all one word. Thank you for listening, and we hope everyone has a great day.